Welcome to the Queen Divas, Queens of Fitness podcast. Join your hosts, three-time WBFF world champions and WBFF royalty, Alicia Gowans and Stephanie Ayala McHugh, as we explore all things female health, training, competing, mindset, and living the fitness life every day.
So I'm super excited to join back with Steph after having had a few weeks off because she's been in prep hiatus with a million things going on with shows across the Bahamas and then getting ready for Dallas and then also prepping for Worlds herself, which I'm actually rather jealous about.
But I'm heartbroken. Honestly, this whole time that we've communicated, Ali, every time I'm like, don't even want to say anything to you because
it's been horrible.
I'm like, I don't want to rub this in your face or like I'm doing wrong. And like, you know, it's just weird. It's weird not being able to do this prep, knowing that you're going to be there and that I'm going to see you there. So.
And it's really weird for me too, not being able to actually physically be there for all of our team that are competing. And I'm constantly getting questions and I hadn't ruled it out for a while, but then I was just like, you know what, with everything going on, we keep having these states shut down all the time. I mean, chances are very freaking slim. So let's just regroup
again. Right?
Exactly.
You guys down again. Yeah. I heard like.
So I was like, let's just regroup, come back next year strong, go for. It's a shame I can't get my 4 in a row. I feel gypped.
You are. You actually ripped off. Feel that way because you are. This pandemic.
Ripped off. Oh my God.
Through like a big rank for all the.
Do you know what I do love?
Yeah.
I can't get my 4th in a row. That kind of. I won't say it doesn't upset me because it really tears the fork out of my nightie, if you know what I mean. And it's upsetting. But what I will say is this, my comeback to reclaim my crown will be sweet. That will be a great journey and a great story. And I'm going to love selling that once I get kicking off on it, which we just got to make sure that the world is doing what it should be doing. But we have a very special guest with us today and someone that we've been trying to line this up now for a couple of months. She's a very good friend of mine, Kayla Mulvogue. She is one of globally the up-and-coming leading women's health specialists. And I'm going to let her talk about herself more than I can, even though I'm a pretty good pimp. I know how to sell people here. She is legitimately one of the brightest minds and one of the, just most beautiful people inside and out when it comes to anything with this. And whenever I have any of my team going through anything or I'm asking questions, I'm just immediately send them her Instagram link. And I'm like, follow this lady because that's where you need to find some really good quality information when it comes to all things pertaining to, the female cycle, the impact of that on training, nutrition, just our physiological differences between, masculine and feminine when it comes to being on the gym floor. And I was lucky enough that I actually undertook the women's physiology course with Kayla. I was one of the first group, wasn't I? And it's a wealth of information and it's astounding when you actually do look at some of the physiological differences between, females and males, even in, even down to our rib cages, like just everything. I'm going to let Kayla go into more detail. Kayla, please take the floor and talk us through how you went from being, as I was saying to Stephanie, a female American football player, which is pretty epic, to exercise scientist, to physiotherapist, to women's health specialist. This is an amazing journey. You've had an amazing career so far, and I'm excited to watch it keep growing. But talk us all through how it even evolved.
Wow, what an introduction. First of all, thank you guys so much for having me, Steph, Ali. I'm honored. I guess it all started for me like from a really young age. I was always into playing sports. I was always kind of like a little tomboy, grew up playing soccer, basketball, all those kind of team sports and things like that. So yeah, I really had a passion for sport and exercise from a really young age. And then, so all sort of through school, I had a few different career paths that I was sort of thinking about. So at one stage it was like, I want to be an Olympic track athlete. And then,
wow.
and then it changed to like a lawyer, which is really kind of weird. And at one stage, like a politician.
Oh my gosh.
Very ambitious. Love it.
I can actually picture you as a politician now that we've thrown that one on the table. I could. You're pretty.
Really? That's
You're pretty smooth. You're pretty smooth. You're pretty diplomatic. I reckon you could do it. I do.
Diplomatic maybe, but like, a little bit of a fence sitter. So I don't know about I don't like being too over opinionated, you know.
But I feel like that's what politicians do. It's behind the scenes when they actually execute some stuff. But I feel like publicly they're diplomatic.
Yeah, they
But anyway, I'm so glad for my own gain and the rest of the world now getting all of the information you have to give. I'm so glad you chose the path you chose, because in politics you would have definitely been, we would have been missing out.
Yeah, well, it was actually now that you say that, I kind of actually just fell into everything that I've sort of come by, really. When I finished school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I was passionate about sport and exercise, and I was always reading up, on the latest articles, or mainly more focused towards nutrition rather than and exercise, rather than injuries and physio and all that sort of stuff. Like a lot of people, the story of physios is when I was growing up, I had all these injuries and my physio really helped me. And then I wanted to be a physio and help, but that's not really my story. So I did exercise and sports science, and I always kind of had the notion of going into doing nutrition. And just through my degree, I attained my the certificate 3 and 4 in fitness. So became a PT, was working as a PT as I was studying. And then, it just so happened that a lot of my friends that were doing my course wanted to do physio. And I kind of missed out on the nutrition side of things when I first got into doing my exercise and sports science. I could have gone on to do it, but then I sort of chose, I was like, oh, everyone's wanting to do physio. What's this physio thing about? So I applied for it and amazingly, luckily got in. And I wasn't even sure when I started. I was like, I'll just try it for a semester and see if I enjoy it. And ended up finishing, loved it, loved everything sort of about the body or the anatomy and everything like that. But when I first left university and started working as a full-time physio in a clinic, I didn't really I really missed the training side of things. And I felt like there was a gap missing between rehab and performance. And so, I really loved the coaching side of things and helping people be better than they are. But I also really loved at the same time helping people get out of pain and get back to a place where they can function properly. But as every sort of physio wants to work with athletes and things like that, I found it more interesting and exciting working with people more in the sort of the performance realm. And so from there, I changed clinics. I did a lot more to do with, it was all very strength rehab based. And then we sort of went into the Pilates side of things, which I didn't really align with too much. And then I started working at Base Gym in Sydney under Base Body Babes, an Australian strength coach. So, learnt lots of awesome information through them. And, that's where I kind of went a little bit more the female specific route. So learned a lot about strength training and performance through BAS. And then through the women's gym, I started, studied a lot more to do with female in terms of, the pelvic floor anatomy and training during pregnancy. Through my actual physio degree, I was able to do continuing education courses through that, because we did have a lot of females that were coming through with or who were wanting to get pregnant or who were pregnant, and then also who were wanting to get back after pregnancy. But not only that, also women who lifting heavy were experiencing pelvic floor issues at the same time as well. So yeah, so from there, then I packed up everything and traveled the world and started teaching seminars in different gyms sort of all around the world. And then COVID happened and I launched my online course more directed towards females specifically. So yeah, I guess that's.
And it's for anyone listening to this, I cannot give a higher level of recommendation for her physiology, women's advanced women's physiology course, because it's actually amazing. Like, it takes you through and breaks you through each sort of segment on, you know, how we're structured, to how, you know, training impacts us, to then the reproductive cycle itself, and then also, you know, nutrition elements around those times. And it's really, it's really quite phenomenal. It's really worth, for anyone who is a solid PT that doesn't have a higher education behind them, this would be a really great way to level up, skill up, and further develop your toolkit, I think, when it comes to, especially if you are female focused, you know, client base, this is a really great feather in your cap to have. So we will have information on that poster show, and I'll get Michaela at the end to basically talk about, you know, the next intake and where you can do them. And I encouraged her to do an on-the-road one and a face-to-face the minute that COVID freed up and allowed her to do it in Australia, because she's very powerful on that floor. So what she talked about was, she said, linking the two. I've got two specialists that I cannot highly recommend enough, and it's Kayla and Xenia. And Xenia is a little bit of a different breed to Kayla, because Kayla is a physio as well as doing the whole physiology side. So she's a little bit different, but she will look at you holistically and then move you through pain into execution. It's quite cool. It's awesome to work with. So for anyone that isn't sort of, you know, aware of that, tap into all of this later when we finish the podcast, and Kayla gives us the instructions on where you can find that information. But the topic of today, and the reason for having this amazing guest on with us, and we did forget to talk about the fact that she is a very proficient American football player here. She's an amazing athlete. I love this. My first photos of seeing her was this staunch, bloody woman in these big shoulder pads and jersey kit with a helmet. She had the little stripes across her face. I'm like, this bitch is tough. I like her already. And then I met her in person. She's a little softer than she looks on that field. But man, she's a talented athlete. So I love that. And coming from someone who has been a talented athlete, then gone on to the academia, then into application, what I love about that is she knows what she's talking about when she's referencing the concepts surrounding, you know, female cycle and its impact on sport. She's lived it at a very high level. So there's really nothing that, you know, anyone sort of presents to her that she's not familiar with across the board. But that is the topic that we're moving into today, is in particular, we've covered off poo in another episode. Now we're going to cover off bleeding and cycle and hormones and all the fun things that as a woman we cannot avoid. But we honestly, most people don't know enough about it. And, you know, for our listeners, I will be honest and say that tracking a cycle is not something most women do. And I will get most people to start with me and I'll be like, so what day are we at in cycle? They're like, what cycle? I'm like, well, I'm not talking about a Les Mills class here, guys. I'm talking about your bleeding cycle. Where are we at? What do you mean? What do you mean what day? And I'm like, what? You don't even track this. You don't even know. Do you know when you ovulate? What's that? Like, what does that look like? Like, I'm serious. This is like some of the stuff I get. So, yeah, right. Steph, how many times, Stephanie, have you had someone go, oh my God, I feel like this and this and this, and they're giving you all these symptoms. And I'll be like, okay, so where are we at in your menstruation cycle?
How many women not just track, but aren't aware of symptoms, like, you know, what to look out for, what to kind of give yourself a little break on whenever we're dealing with these things, because we are undergoing something of this every month. So you should become a little more aware of when it is, right? Like, this is tending to happen, right? Your tendencies, your trigger points. It comes most of the time around your cycle, you know, obviously repeating itself. So if you start tracking, I think this is what Ali really hit it right off the gate. Please, ladies, anybody listening to this right now, get to tracking your period. Like, that is so important. Like, it is so crucial, not just for mood, you know, as well as the symptoms,
Exactly.
as well as your training. Like your training
Exactly.
is so much.
And
I'll let her actually lead into it.
It's knowing too, right? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you go, oh, I'm bloated. I think it's the bread, or I think it's this, or I think it's that. And it's like, yeah, okay, that would be relevant if we weren't ovulating, or if we weren't, you know, coming into your cycle in 5 days' time. You're just literally bloated from, you know, some other components that are physiological symptoms. It doesn't mean you need to cut something out or reduce calories or do something drastic with food. That doesn't need to happen, I guess is my point. There are impacts, though, of the way the body will digest food at different phases. I'm going to let Kayla go into that in a little bit more detail. But what I'm referencing is just the knee-jerk reaction sometimes people will have because they just don't understand where they're physically at physiologically, right? So Kayla, talk us through. Let's actually break into it's almost like doing that segment inside of the women's physiology course again, where we open up for the little pink slide and it's all about the cycle. Let's go through that one.
Yeah, perfect. Where do you want me to start?
So I think first of all, let's talk through, okay, well, what is it? What does the full cycle look like? What are the phases? What's the normal duration? And then maybe I think in particular for a lot of women listening to this, what are the common symptoms that you have going on month to month, but you don't even register that that's linked to hormones, raging, surging, declining, as they do with the normal wane of our cycle?
Yeah. So I think the first most important thing to point out is that like every woman experiences her cycle differently. And not only that, every woman experiences her cycle potentially differently month to month. So, you know, 1 month could be, you know, she might have a longer cycle, she might have a shorter cycle, depending on a number of different factors. Like there are so many factors that contribute to, you know, the changes in the cycle that we see. And that can be 100% like training. It can be dieting. It can be stress is a huge one as well. Like all these different impacts, environmental impacts that have such an impact on, you know, our menstrual cycle. So I guess if we break it down, like right to the nitty gritty, you know, we have this cycle because we are responsible for reproduction, right? So like women are responsible for the existence or the continuation of the human race, basically. Yeah. Right.
Then you have that moment where you're like, with great responsibility.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if this is filmed, but like, can people see you throwing up the Bible?
Yeah, I did. That's why I did it, because people, I'm going to be on YouTube and people are going to watch me flexing at the fact that we're responsible for all of human life.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, so I mean, like if we break it down, like right to the nitty gritty, we have two main phases, which can be broken down again into sort of like, I guess, 4 kind of sub phases, if that kind of makes sense. So we have like our first phase is our follicular phase, and technically menstruation or bleeding is a part of that phase. And then we have our second phase, which is our luteal phase. And then ovulation kind of occurs, you know, somewhere in the middle there. And so what's kind of happening during that follicular phase, during that, you know, that very first phase of menstruation when we're actually bleeding, is all our hormones have just dropped. They're all super low. You know, our main ones being estrogen, progesterone as women. And that's sort of, you know, we kind of have this idea that being on your period is like really bad, and it's really bad for training, really bad for competing and things like that. That can be true like more sort of towards the start when you're just coming down off like the high from the hormones from the previous phase. But, you know, once they sort of start to level out, women, even while they're still bleeding, can start to feel, you know, a lot better, because we have kind of this male-like physiology where our hormones are quite stable during this phase. And then, you know, as estrogen starts to rise, we start to, you know, and we sort of stop that bleeding. This is when what's happening actually like at a cellular level is that the egg is becoming more mature in the ovaries. So what happens is we actually have some hormones from the brain. So our pituitary gland in our brain releases what's called FSH and LH, and during that follicular phase, it's FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and it's a gonadotropin, which actually goes down to the uterus, down to the ovaries, and it signals the maturation of the eggs or the oocytes. And what happens is it starts to build up cells around the egg, and these cells start producing estrogen, and then we sort of start to see that rise in estrogen as we enter sort of the later follicular phase, leading up to ovulation. Yeah, and then so, you know, as estrogen sort of starts to rise, we sort of start to feel an increase in energy. Women tend to become a little bit more sexual. They, you know, libido increases because these are our sex hormones, right? So, you know, she's becoming fertile. She's looking for a mate. She's looking to fertilize her eggs. And so, yeah, we sort of see this rise in estrogen, and it can be a really good time, you know, to go a little bit harder in your training if you're feeling like this, right? And it can also be a good dieting tool as well, because our hunger tends to decrease during this time. So, you know, there have been studies that have shown the inverse relationship between appetite and sex drive. So, you know, when you're sort of, you know, looking for a mate, you're not really focused on looking for food, whereas like the opposite is almost true.
Unless you're dating at restaurants, and then you kind of join both. So true, though. It's so true. And actually, just to backtrack for 1 second, for everyone listening, when we're talking about recording your cycle, right, which most people won't know, but typically day 1 of your cycle is your first day of a proper full bleed. So if you start on, say, the Tuesday, but it's in the afternoon and it's like only light, that's not technically day 1. Day 1's actually Wednesday when you're full heavy. So for anyone knowing, if they're actually starting to track their days in their cycle, that's kind of how you want to go. Now, one thing that I do find very interesting about ovulation, Kayla, is flushed face. You actually get more red in the face. It's kind of random. They reckon that it's a bit of a glow that women get, and it's part of the sexual attraction thing too, because of the whole concept of mating, right? But that's actually to do with blood flow, isn't it? There's like an increase in, I don't know, you'll tell us. You'll probably have it way better on tap than me. I'll probably bastardize it, but I do know there's an increase in blood flow, and it's all linked to the fact that everything's releasing, everything's starting to peak, everything's starting to, you know, come through and be ready for fertilization.
Yeah, so as we sort of, I guess, reach more towards ovulation, we see like there's kind of like a feedback loop with the FSH, the gonadotropin, and the estrogen. So it keeps releasing more and more to, you know, stimulate the maturation of those eggs. And then what happens is, once there's a big surge, like a really big surge of estrogen, we see a spike of estrogen just before ovulation. It's almost like it stops the release of FSH. So it's like a feed forward loop, and then it's like a feedback loop where it's like, okay, stop this, start releasing luteinizing hormone, which is LH.
Yep.
And then what happens is that again goes down to the reproductive organs and starts releasing or progesterone is starting to release. So LH actually degrades the ovary wall, the egg is released into the fallopian tube, and then what's left over is called the corpus luteum, which starts producing progesterone, which helps to thicken the uterine lining and stuff like that. And so when we see this release in progesterone actually starts to increase our core body temperature as well. So during the luteal phase, the second phase of the cycle that we sort of spoke about before, this is following ovulation, we start to see this rise in core body temperature. We see a rise in metabolism as well. So this is why we kind of get hungrier, because we see these I don't know if you guys have spoken on the podcast about before, but leptin levels start to drop, and women are quite sensitive to leptin. So you start feeling, like less satiated, more hungry, want to eat more food because we're burning more energy. And that'll be sort of a reason why that we start to get like this flushed face as well, like our increase, our core body temperature is increasing as well.
It's crazy.
So then,
what I find
so
the
egg is
is the training part, honestly. Like,
yes.
I think, just like for me, when from everything, you know, just from obviously experience, we all have our period, we all deal with the cycle. And I think when you don't track and you're not aware, and I get so many messages from clients of like, oh my God, I couldn't lift so heavy today.
Yeah.
And they don't even consider the fact that they're on their period. I'm just saying, like, it should have already been something that you already self-answer, right? Like, oh, I already know I can't, like, it's okay. It's okay this week if I can't go as hard, or if I need a little more recovery, or if I need to switch up my, you know, obviously my training a little bit to be able to get back into it. Like, obviously to be able to see some more results too, because we get so in our head about how we look on these days. Oh my God, my abs left. Like yesterday I had them. Like, oh my God, they disappeared. Like I look like a balloon or like a whale, you know, like all these things that, and I personally have said these things, you know, like, oh my God, I feel like a whale. Like actually I was like that last week. I was just all in my head. Like, holy shit. Like I had abs a couple days ago. I completely lost them. And it's okay. Like I understand what my body's undergoing. So you don't give yourself all this grief. Like you don't freak out and you don't throw in the towel thinking that this is not working, right? Like the prep isn't working, or your diet, or all your hard work went out the window. So really trying to make sure you are just aware of the symptoms as well as what it affects in your training, to me is the most important as well. I mean, like the symptoms, you can't get by them. Like we're going to have them. Some women deal with them, like you said, you know, more than others, or some have more irregular cycles than others. So if you do have more irregular cycles, you probably have harder symptoms. If you have something more regular, then you're probably going to deal with something that is probably a little more manageable. On
that note, Steph, in the first phase there, Kayla, when we're looking at, okay, bleeding started, we're coming through, and then we're, you know, getting this sort of increasing, you know, rise in a certain hormone, then a big surge. What is the impact on training at those points typically? Now, obviously it's different for everyone, but what can people expect to see when they're in that initial sort of crescendo?
Yeah, so like I said before, like during that phase where like menstruation, where the all the hormones are low, we sort of have this really stable physiology, can be a really good time to train and compete and things like that. We have more of this like male like physiology, and then as estrogen starts to rise, like our energy levels are going to rise. You know, estrogen is also known as an anti-catabolic hormone, so you know, really good for strength training, really good for recovery, really good for, you know, putting on and maintaining muscle mass. And then sort of, you know, around ovulation is when it all kind of peaks. But one thing that we need to be careful of around ovulation and when estrogen peaks as well is that it can also be a higher risk for injury. So they've done studies on AFL players where they found that, and as well with our structure and things like that, which we can go into if you want to a little bit later, they found that ACL injuries were a lot more prevalent, soft tissue injuries a lot more prevalent, you know, during like around ovulation when estrogen was higher. And we find the same thing in pregnancy as well. When there is a greater surge of estrogen during pregnancy, this is when women tend to experience more of that pelvic girdle pain, when all the ligaments are loosening to, you know, create the space in the pelvic area for the baby. And, you know, historically, it's been sort of thought that relaxin was actually the hormone responsible for the ligament laxity. But recent studies have showed that that's more sort of to do with rats and not humans. And then when we looked at humans and compared humans and the ligament laxity in their knees and things like that, it did follow more of like this estrogen curve as well. So
that's super interesting.
Around training.
And I only asked that question. I only asked that question because like Steph probably doesn't have it because she's not like nursing the physiological crap I am with my back. But I find for me, even though technically at that point leading up to ovulation, I should be feeling stronger, I actually feel a little bit opposite. I actually feel like I've got to pull back. It's where I have my most chronic states of pain with my back, and I have a central nervous system that feels like it's just got the floodgates open and it's on a high alert. But then the minute that I drop and I start coming and progesterone starts rising, I find it eases off, and I find I get a bit of relief, and I find then I can start pushing a little bit more load. So I'm probably one of those odd ones. It's a little outside of the realm of what hormonally, naturally I should be feeling, but that's directly related to injuries. That makes a lot of sense to me. And that's another reason why I asked, because I wanted to have you talk about the impact of these surges on connective tissues and stuff like that. So that's awesome. Because I think that's, again, something people don't realize.
It's very...
No, I've definitely had clients the same that, around ovulation, it's not a great time for them. They're feeling like, not the best around that time as well. And, with in the gym, like, it is a safe environment. Like, it is a lot of a safer environment as opposed to, say, like contact sports or something like that. So, we can push hard if we're feeling good, like you said, Ali, but maybe instead of, if your program says back squat, but you don't feel stable enough, or you feel like, not great there, like, you have the option to go maybe leg press and like change that up. So knowing where you are in your cycle, because you can go hard on a leg press where you're quite externally stabilized, and there's a less risk of injury there. You can fail in a good position as opposed to like, a low bar squat or something like that where you're a lot less externally stabilized. So knowing that can be really, really empowering. And Steph, as you said before, it is really empowering for women to be able to know, where in their cycle they are, and that may be contributing to some of the feelings or some of the weight gain that they sort of see. I think it's just, probably one of the most important things. It's just, it's not like we have to, I guess, be a victim to our cycles. Like, we can use it as an ergogenic, we can use it as a training aid.
Absolutely.
100%.
And there are some really great benefits. There are some really great benefits for training for us as well.
And
hitting on the weight thing, just because I think this is something that we forget, everyone forgets, that fluctuation is okay. Like, it is okay during your cycle. Like, this is normal. And we're like, am I weird, or why am I gaining so much? Or is this, obviously a normal thing? And absolutely, like, this is, and some women, yes, they may not, but more so.
Steph, what's your average fluctuation, to let everyone understand that you and I both experience this, but it's real, right? Honestly, how far can yours go either side?
Give or take 2 or 3 pounds. So for me, that would be, well, in kilos, that would actually be almost a kilo, like from half to a kilo, half a kilo to a kilo. Like, and that's pretty drastic for someone, just, I'm saying, that looks at the scale all the time, and like, oh my God, what just happened? Like, just gained 3 pounds. And that for me, that would be a whole kilo. Well, technically a kilo and a half, So,
and I think it's great for people to know that, because I think that they look at, I think people that just have not yet reached a level where you're at, Steph, will look at you or some of the other big name profile ladies and be like, oh my gosh, I bet they don't experience this. I bet it's just me. But no, we all experience it. I will have at times sort of 2 kilo gains at different times during ovulation. And then I kind of drop it, and then I get it back again when I'm menstruating. So 100%. Kayla, I'm sure you are the same. Like, we all experience this, and it is completely normal. I'd love to know more about the benefits, though, when we look at the benefits of all of this.
Like the benefits of estrogen.
And the benefits of the training for us, even maybe on the regulation of some of these things, without it being quite so chaotic either, the symptoms that we might have.
So, I mean, like I said before, estrogen being anti-catabolic, it actually helps us, with protein synthesis, helps us maintain muscle mass. It actually also helps us with recovery. So I don't know if you guys have trained with male partners or counterparts or, training buddies, things like that. But we're kind of ready to go after a few minutes rest if you're on like a heavy strength set, whereas the guys need a lot more time to recover and then to back up their heavy set. I mean, we are probably lifting, absolutely lower weights than them, but, in terms of like training splits for women, we can hit legs 3-4 times a week, whereas for guys, their recovery time is going to be a lot longer, right? Like they're going to, maybe once, twice a week, maybe once every, 10 days or something like that, because, just the way that we're able to recover is a lot quicker than guys. And, our, rest between sets doesn't need to be as long as them. And we're able to also go for a higher number of reps for a higher intensity than them as well. Even though our 1RMs, our absolute strength might be lower, our relative strength is, really up there in terms of, and that's got stuff to do with muscle fiber type and things as well, not just, no system exists in isolation. It's not just, to do with hormones, but it plays a massive role in it as well.
Steph, have you ever noticed like your ability to push greater weight at certain times of cycle? Are you someone who typically sits in that middle of the month zone?
For me, it's actually from the middle to the lead up. It's like normally me hitting some of my best lifts leading up to my period week. So that would be, it's so sad. Carrie always makes fun of me because like on my leg day, particularly, it's like I get my period like on the day of. And I'm like, it must be the weight. I was just I would get so upset because I was just about to have a good session. I'm like, I was literally about to be able to hit it hard. And here it goes. I like run to the bathroom because you already know, it's like,
it's so funny.
In the middle of a session, like, God, that's like the worst, and I think it happens so often for me on a leg day that's why he does make fun of me. But I think that it's just for me on the second half after ovulation, that's where I've also noticed an increase of strength. But I do also notice just mood changes right immediately after just the period being gone. Like when you were referring to the follicular phase, the second portion or the ending of the follicular phase, where I start noticing my mood just changes completely. Like I start feeling so much better, like my spirit is light. I don't necessarily feel like moody and just kind of, we get in our head. And for me, like mood swings are real, especially just as coaches. Like, Ali, you relate, we deal with so many women and it sometimes kind of like rubs off on you, right? Like it just kind of goes in energy waves and it like kind of comes, I'm like, oh my God, I can go for her, but, and it's more about like mood for me in the first half of the cycle. Second half, I noticed more of my training increasing as well in strength. My intensity, I'm like so much better immediately after, like my recovery is on point. But then ovulation, I'm going to have to test a little bit more on like I haven't really noticed or paid attention as far as my actual ovulation day, how my training goes, or I'm not as light as you, Ali, so I don't get flushed. I don't ever get flushed. So
I do. You can even see it now. Look at me now. Like you can see it right now. That's why I was like, I brought it up because this is what happens to me. I get, and because I don't wear makeup, you can see it on me, right? So I get really pink and it's only ever literally around those surges. So at that peak and coming into the peak of ovulation, this is what happens to me. And then I'm like, normal again. It's so strange. Chris always makes fun of me. Yeah. You'll probably get just a little bit of color in your cheek, Steph. You won't go red like me. You'll just get a little bit of color. But I just noticed the difference because of my connective tissue situation with my back and just the pain situation. The signals are on like red alert for me. So I find ovulation like that. But ovulation pain is also not uncommon, is it, Kayla? Like it's not uncommon for a woman to get tenderness and to get sore and to even get little cramps when you're actually releasing the eggs. That's not uncommon either.
Yeah, no, a lot of women can experience, a lot of different symptoms. And, some of the symptoms we kind of think that we kind of accept them as well. We kind of think, they're common, so they're normal, but a lot of them aren't necessarily normal. Like women shouldn't really be having extremely painful periods, let's say. Like, a sign of there might be something potentially underlying wrong could be like extremely painful periods or, symptoms that, are maybe not not necessarily normal. So, you know, we need to be careful as well that, you know, we're not just accepting certain symptoms as normal, because it could be, you know, I guess a signal of something underlying that may potentially be wrong, like PCOS, endometriosis, things like that.
And actually, one of my questions, Kayla, since you're actually touching on that, would be when you're skipping your period. So this is a very common question.
Yeah, good question.
I skipped my period this month. Is that something, you know, I should be worried about? And especially for competitors or anybody in a competition phase, I think it's also a very common thing when the woman starts dropping too much body fat or gets to such a lower body fat level that they do skip their period or lose, obviously being able to, you know, have any of the phases go through. I mean, they have the symptoms, but they actually don't bleed, you know? So what would you say, you know, besides lower body fat levels, or how long can they even stay there in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing. So, you know, what happens is like everything is a stress, right? So like training is a stress and dieting is a stress, and we have life stress, we have you know, business stress, whether it's like, you know, work, whether it's relationships, whether it's financial, whether it's COVID, like all these other stresses in our environments, right? Like so much stress. And so when the body is sort of overstressed, whether it be, you know, stress could be it's exercising too much, or it's not getting enough food, not getting enough calories, it's not a safe environment for us to reproduce, right? It's not a safe environment for us to get pregnant and have a baby and bring like life into the world. So, you know, the body kind of shutting down the hormones or like down regulating the hormones is, you know, we call it a dysfunction, but it's actually an adaptation. The body's doing what it's supposed to do to sort of keep us safe. It's basically, you know, saving those calories or saving the energy to keep us alive. So, you know, our brain takes up a lot of energy. We need these calories for our functioning of our heart, functioning of our organs. So imagine like, you know, the expansive like energy tax that making a baby is going to take. It's not a safe environment. So that's why the body sort of, it down regulates like the release of hormones, because, you know, having your menstrual cycle, it's, you know, a sign of health, but it's not necessarily something that we need for survival. And, you know, as well, like a lot of, I think, young girls think that, you know, losing their cycle, it doesn't really matter if they don't want to have a baby at the time. But for some, it can take years to get back.
I get that a lot. No, I do.
Yeah, my immediate reaction.
I get that a lot from
women. Yeah, it's true, Steph. Like we hear this a lot, and my immediate reaction is, yeah, that's fine because you're 22. But at some point when you meet the right man, you're actually, or woman, I don't care, you're actually going to want to have a baby, probably. I won't say all, because I've got a lot of clients that never want them, and that's fine. But I'm going to say 70%. Well, that's true too.
On the other spectrum, because I actually had a conversation not too long ago with a client that was actually just like, no, I'm just closing that chapter of my life. Like I don't want to have a children. You know, I don't want to have any children. And you know what? That's a personal decision, and
exactly.
You know, of course, it's your choice. But if you understand your health and your organ function,
correct.
And how that also brings down so many other down regulations in your system. I think that's when we should really reconsider like birth control or IUDs, and, you know, obviously like knowing if you really don't want to have a child and taking prescription medicine that obviously cause these things too, because down the road of longevity on taking anything as well as going to cause these imbalances.
But also too, right, for that lady that's talking about not having them and she's just past that point, and that's fine. Like, just think about the concept though, that if you're losing cycle and happy to continue losing cycle, you're actually going to be at detriment though with so many other things. You're going to age faster. You're going to have, you know, impaired metabolic capacity. So you will not have the life and the physique and the health that you want, and you won't age gracefully. So it's in your best interest to still have a positive focus on a positive reproductive capacity and have that as a health marker, whether kids are a function for you or not, right? And they don't have to be for everyone, but I would urge anyone young to just not get complacent and think, oh, it doesn't matter. I can go 3 years without a cycle. I'll be good. No, you really may regret that later. And IVF is very expensive, so don't fuck yourself later. Think about this now. So, you know, like that's just something I would throw out for our youngsters. And then again, I would reiterate that the health markers of this function being in play goes well beyond just producing a baby for anyone that's kind of like, well, I don't want a baby anyway, because it really does. I mean, temporarily and short term, fine. If that happens, okay, but you kind of want to rectify it as soon as possible. I know, Kayla, you'll agree with me on that. It impacts so many other things. And think about it like this. If you're down-regulating your whole estrogen and surge, you're missing a whole lot of gains. You're missing all this capacity to grow and recover.
Right. Which with the tying into nutrition, like even going back to touching into what we were saying about, you know, leptin, you know, increasing or decreasing, you know, throughout the phases of the menstrual cycle. It's normal to have some cravings and tendencies during, you know, that period week. Where would you say, Kayla, just to kind of clear it up for everybody listening that, you know, kind of thinks they're crazy throughout the month, you know, dealing with these cravings, you know, the peak would be period week. And when does that stabilization normally happen throughout the month or throughout the cycle?
Yeah. So, I mean, like just going back onto that point, making a point about, you know, the other health markers, you know, progesterone has an effect on your nervous system as well. So women who, you know, if we look at like postmenopausal women, for example, they have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. They have an increased risk of dementia, Alzheimer's. Progesterone has neuroprotective effects on the body as well. And then estrogen, if we look at, you know, female athlete triad and things like that with the down regulation of estrogen not being, you know, not having that those anti-catabolic effects, we see decreases in muscle mass, lean muscle mass. We see decreases in bone density as well. So women who are postmenopausal, who have gone through menopause, they're not getting their period anymore. You know, they're seeing things like osteoporosis, like all these sort of other diseases. But then, Steph, going back to what you were saying about you know, the cravings and things like that around the second part of the cycle. Estrogen and progesterone have an effect on your insulin as well. So during that first phase, during that follicular phase, we tend to be more insulin sensitive. And then during that second phase of the cycle, we tend to be more insulin resistant. So we're not utilizing carbs as well as we could be. And also that's, I guess, why you kind of crave a little bit more fats during that phase, and why you can, you can even increase your calories. It's a great dieting tool. If you can stick to your calories, like, you know, while the energy is increasing, it's a great dieting tool. But, you know, allow yourself 100 to 200 extra calories a day, you know, have that piece of chocolate, you know, it's a signal, right? Like your body's it's craving like the magnesium from the chocolate, it's craving the fats from the chocolate, to help support, you know, your hormones, and then, you know, satiate those cravings as well. And maybe, you know, decreasing your carbs, increasing your fats around this phase can be a way to sort of help offset those cravings and that hunger, and a way that you can sort of work with your physiology as well.
That's awesome. And to obviously wrap up that craving side of things and food kind of things, what would you say, are there any type of things you would recommend, or foods that would obviously alleviate any symptoms or help? You know, obviously, like you even mentioned the dark chocolate. I think dark chocolate, or I don't even say dark. I think I added the dark, but you said chocolate, so I just made it dark, you know?
Darker the better. The darker the better. Yeah. I mean, definitely. So I think the most important ones for women as well is going to be, like I said before, magnesium, and dark chocolate does contain a lot of magnesium as well. Zinc is important, and also your B vitamins as well for women, and women especially who are on oral contraception or some sort of hormonal contraception as well. These, you know, we can get them in our diets. We can get them from meats. I think a lot of women are scared of eating like red meat as well, because they think it's a lot fattier, but that can be really helpful in our diet for supporting our hormones, like during this phase as well. And then, you know, if they're not getting it from their food, say, you know, you are going into a prep and you're on really low calories, some supplements might be able to help, you know, zinc, magnesium, vitamin B and things like that. And especially, those women who are on hormonal contraceptions, who are, you know, their normal hormones are suppressed, and they're having, you know, these exogenous hormones, these hormones outside the body, these synthetic hormones almost like popped into their body. And that's going to, downregulate your normal hormones, like your normal release of hormones as well. And like we said before, it can take some time to get back there.
And that's another episode for you guys, but that's definitely going to be an episode, you know, talking about, you know, birth control and IUDs and how that also, you know, affects your training, your metabolism, and obviously your physique if you're doing this for a goal, obviously your health in the long run. So that will be some juicy and good stuff for the next one. But Kayla, it's been awesome being able to pick your brain and, you know, being able to, you know, hear obviously your very intelligent side of the physio of the woman's body. So I really appreciate all of the details, and obviously every listener, make sure to follow her, you know, make sure you guys also, I think you guys are going to tell us how to get your course online. I think that you have something. How do we find that?
So my course is Applied Women's Physiology and Training. It's an 8-week online course. You can find it, I think at the moment it's kayleephysio.com, but we're going to be changing that to AWPT University. So that's the company, that our education company, that we're going to be releasing a few more courses that take a deeper dive into the AWPT. AWPT is sort of like a broad overview of it all, but you know, there is so much, like we
bigger vision today. Bigger vision. I see the transition. That's very good. But what is your Instagram? So if any listener wants to just look you up on Instagram to be able to follow your journey there.
Instagram is just at Kayla Lee Physio.
Okay, Kayla Lee Physio. Awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, Kayla. That was awesome.
Thank you guys.
And I think there's so much information there for everyone that's going through a lot of these things now. They might, as they're going through it, be like, oh, hang on a minute, what about that podcast the girls had on? And it might be this, right? I think it's really powerful. On one side note too, for anyone listening to this, one last thing that I found super interesting was the fact that progesterone, when it's actually at its right, you know, I guess height, and we've actually got the right amount that we're meant to be getting. I don't know about you girls, but I definitely feel it. How good is sleep? Oh my God.
Sleep
is so much better. I find when I'm at the point where it's lowest, that's actually where I have a little bit more trouble sleeping. So again, for anyone listening to this that might be having, you know, rough night's sleep, again, think, where am I in my cycle? Because it may actually be affecting things.
And sleep is another 100%. Topic. We will definitely be.
It's like this. We always end up in a conversation like, okay, that's going to be another one. That's going to be another one. That's going to be another one. Well, thanks so much, Kayla. I've loved having you on. I know Steph has too. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm really glad we've been able to cover off this topic. And for anyone listening, if you've got any questions, post this. Comment below, you know, send them through DM, because we will definitely answer them. And then DM Kayla directly. She is an absolute institute of knowledge. She's awesome.
Obviously, your course is going to be coming out, so I'm excited. Thanks, Kayla. And thanks, everyone listening.
Thanks, Kayla. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Queen Divas, Queens of Fitness podcast. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Queen Divas Pod, on Twitter at Queen Divas 4, and follow our hosts on Instagram, Alicia at Alicia Gowans _WBFF Pro, and Steph at Stephanie Ayala 7. See you all next week.